So in this class we're going to rig the legs. Legs are generally rigged with an IK setup. IK stands for inverse kinematics. It just means the way that the joints move, they're going to be moving together. To do that, we'll employ the use of some IK handles. So just make sure that you have your rigging menu set selected and activate the rigging shelf. Now we can get to the IK handles in two different ways. Under skeleton, under IK, we can go to create IK handle, or we can just go to the shelf here, and you can see if you hover over this icon, it says create IK handle. So we'll just click on the create IK handle button here, and you can see right away it puts it into our shelf. So if we double click on this icon now, we'll get the IK handle tool properties. So the first IK handle we want to create is a rotate plane solver. This will give us the twist capabilities for the leg. To attach an IK handle to a leg, we're going to click on his hip first, and then go down and click on the ankle joint. And now we have an IK handle attached to this joint chain for his leg. So if we select this IK handle now, and we hit W for our move tool, you can see it moves the whole leg up. Right, so we need to create two more IK handles so that we can control the feet. So we'll click on our IK handle tool, and we'll change the solver to single chain solver. And now we're going to go from the ankle to the ball of the foot. Then we're going to click on it again, and we're going to create one more from the ball of the foot to the toe. Alright, so before we go any farther, let's go to Windows and let's open up our hypergraph. Alright, so we're going to rename these IK handles now. We want to make sure we name everything as we go. So this IK handle, if you select it in the hypergraph, it selects it in your Maya panel as well. So we're going to select this first one. It's just called IK handle 1. So I'm just going to rename that ankle IK. And you can rename things right here in the channel box just by double clicking on the name. And if you just leave a space, it'll automatically put a underscore there for you. We're going to name this one football IK, and we'll name the final one toe IK. Okay, so now if I drag a box over all three of these IK handles, you can see that I can move the leg around nicely, but animators aren't going to be selecting IK handles. There's conventions that have been sort of set forth in the industry. Animators are generally used to controlling the character with control curves. So we're going to be creating some control curves and attaching the IK handles to them in different ways in order to get the feet to perform some natural movements. Alright, so I'm just going to minimize my hypergraph for a moment. Let's create a control curve for the foot. Change our shelf to curves. The first one here. We're going to create a NURB circle. And I'm just going to turn my polygons off for a minute. We can go to show polygons. And I'm just going to scale that by hitting R on the keyboard or going to your toolbar here. And we'll just scale that right up. I'm going to show my polygons again. I want to make sure that the control curve is on the outside of the foot and it's easy to select. Alright, so we can shape this a little bit more by right clicking over it and choosing control vertex, and now we can grab these vertices and give it a different shape. So we can press F8 to get out of component mode. Alright, so I'm just going to rotate this, and we can just type in 90 here just to make sure it's perfectly straight up and down. I'm going to right click over the control curve and select control vertex, and we're just going to hold X down on the keyboard and grid snap these, and then we'll just move these up a little bit. I just want to create a shape something like this just so it'll be easy for the animator to select the curve, and I'll even bring it up a little bit at the toe. So we'll hit F8 to get out of component mode, and let's just bring it back over to the foot and see how it fits. So I want to make sure it's perfectly flat on the ground. Okay, it is, and now we can point snap it to one of the joints. So let's go to show, and we'll uncheck polygons. We can hit F on our keyboard to focus into it, and let's hold V down to point snap it. I'm just going to point snap it to the foot so I'm sure that it's even in the Z axis. Go to show and turn polygons back on. We can move it till it fits the foot nicely. So at least this way the animator can select this control curve from behind the foot. I have it pop up a little bit at the toe so that it's easy to select from far away like this. I'm going to hold control down and press D, or I can go to edit, duplicate, and we're just going to slide that over to the other side. Alright, so I'm just going to close up my hypergraph and change my layout here for a better workspace. Change this to perspective and we have our hypergraph here. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is delete history and freeze transformations on our control curves. The history is always shown in the channel box under inputs. You can see we don't really have much history here. You get a lot of history when you're modeling a character. Under inputs here, you'll see this huge list, and we always clear the history when we're done modeling before we start rigging. When we bound the skin to the skeleton, we get the skin cluster 1, but we need that there for the skin cluster to take hold and to stay there. As you build your control curves, it's always a good idea just to get rid of any history. So we'll go to edit, we'll delete by type, just choose history and click on it. We want to delete history so that we have a cleaner file. and we'll get less lagging later on in the software. And the next thing we want to do is freeze transformations on these controls. So we're going to do this with every time we create a control, we're going to delete history and freeze transformations. Because we moved this control around to get it into place, it has some translate values and some rotate values. We want those to be at 0 so that we can zero it out and return the foot to its original position at any time. To freeze transformations, we'll go to modify, go freeze transforms, and let's take a look at the option box for a minute. Freeze transformations on the translate and rotate. We haven't scaled it, so the scales are all still at 1, and that's fine. And we'll hit freeze transform. And then when we do that, you can see that now all the translate and rotate values are at 0. So now we can always zero this out just to bring it back to its original position. We want to make sure we name our control curves as we go. So we'll call this left foot. I'm just going to short form CTL for control. And then we want to parent all of our IK handles to that foot control. So we'll just drag a box over all these IK handles that we created, and we'll middle mouse button drag them to the left foot control. And you can see it just groups them underneath, or parents them. So now when we select the foot control, it brings all the IK handles with it. And now we're going to group some of the IK handles and then change the pivot of the groups so that we can move the feet in different ways. Okay, so in this next step, we want to change the pivot point of the foot control to be at the heel, so that when we rotate this foot control, it actually rotates from the heel. We're going to press D on the keyboard, and that's going to allow us to move the pivot point. And we're just going to move it back. And we want to hold V down on the keyboard so that we can snap it right to the heel. I'm just going to go full screen in the side view for a minute. And just make sure, just go in really close and make sure that we snap it right to the back of the heel there. We'll press D again to lock that into place. And if we rotate it now, you can see it rotates right from the heel, and that's perfect. That'll give us the mobility we need for walk cycles and whatnot. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to group the ball IK to the toe IK. So select those two, select the ball IK and the toe IK, and we're going to hit Control G on the keyboard. That gives us another group with the foot and toe IK underneath it. We're going to name that group, we'll just name it Toe Wiggle Group. We're going to snap the pivot point of that group to the football joint. So I'm just going to go to Show here and turn off our polygons for a minute. So you can see if you hit W on the keyboard for your move tool, you can see that the pivot point is at the origin. So we're going to hit D again on our keyboard so we can move the pivot point. And I'm just going to hold V down again. And we're going to select the center there and just snap it right to that joint. And we'll hit D again to lock it into place. And then if we rotate that, we'll turn our polygons on for a minute. And if we rotate that, now we can see we get some nice dexterity in the foot. We have our pivot point right where we need it for the toe wiggle. Alright, so now we're going to group the ankle IK to itself, and we'll move that pivot point so we can get the heel to peel off the ground with the toe staying planted. We'll hold down Control and hit G again, and we get a new group here. We're going to call it Heel Rise Group. And I'm just going to turn my polygons off again for a second. And we're going to hit D on the keyboard so we can move the pivot point, and we're going to snap this one to the ball of the foot. We'll press D again to lock that into place, and now when we rotate that, you can see you get the heel peeling off the ground and the toe stays pinned to the ground. So that'll also give us the mobility we need to animate walk cycles. Okay, so now we want to create another group that'll allow us to rotate the entire foot from the toe. So we'll select the foot control and Control G on the keyboard, and we'll name this left toe pivot. And we're going to press D down on the keyboard so that we can move the pivot point. Again, I'll hide my polygons, and I'm going to press V. We'll grab the center there and we'll snap it right to the toe. And then we'll press D again to lock it into place. And we'll turn our polygons back on to check it. And now this group will rotate the entire foot from the toe. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is create some new attributes, just so we can access all those movements just from this one control. So you can see here on the left in the channel box we have all of our translate and rotate attributes. We also have the scale and visibility. We're going to create a couple of new attributes in here so that we can have all those movements happen by middle mouse button dragging. So you can see now if I select Rotate X and I middle mouse button drag, I can control the foot this way. But when this character is fully rigged, the IK handles and the bones are going to be hidden and non-selectable for the animator, because animators are used to accessing character controls just from these control curves. So we're going to add the attributes. So let's go to Modify, and we'll go down to Add Attribute. Let's name it Heel Raise. You want to give your attributes names that are obvious to whoever's going to be using them. Alright, so you want the make attribute to be keyable, and you want the data type to be on float. All these settings can stay how they are. most important part is basically the name and the numeric attribute properties. For this movement, because it's just the heel going up, it's not going to go down. It's just the heel lifting. We're going to leave the minimum on 0, and we're just going to have a maximum value of 10. The way the foot's sitting now will be a value of 0, and then when we raise the heel all the way, that'll be a value of 10. And we'll hit add. And as soon as you hit add, you can see this new heel raise attribute over here in the channel box. So let's add more attributes for the toe wiggle. We'll call this one toe flap. Now because the toe can flap up or down, we're going to add a minimum and maximum number. So we'll go with -10 for the minimum, and that'll be when the toe flaps down. The maximum can be 10 for when the toe flaps up all the way, and then default to 0 the way it's shown now. And we'll hit add for that one. You can see we have toe flap here. Alright, so the next attribute we're going to create is called a foot roll. It's a very handy movement for walk cycles. And we're going to do a minimum and a maximum. So we'll go -10. And for the maximum, we'll go with 10. We'll click add. And we'll just close that right up. Any other movements we need with the foot can just be achieved just by rotating and translating the foot control itself. Alright, so let's set up our set driven keys. Alright, to do that we have to change our menu set. So let's go to animation. And under key, we want to go down to set driven keys and then select set. Once we do that, our set driven key window pops up. So when we're creating set driven keys, one object is the driver and the other object is the driven. Now almost anything in Maya can be a driver or be driven, but for this example the foot control is going to be the driver. So we're going to make sure we have the foot control selected, and we're going to click on load driver, and then you can see all the attributes pop up. So let's do the heel raise first. So you want to make sure you highlight the heel raise attribute, and then the driven is going to be our heel raise group. So we'll select that in the hypergraph, and then we'll click on load driven. We want the rotate X of that group to drive this movement. So we're going to click on the rotate X, and as soon as we do that, you can see that our key button just came out of being grayed out. So we can just key that right now, and you can see that it sets a key on the rotate X. We're going to leave this alone for now, and we're just going to select our foot control. Remember we chose 10 for the maximum, so you can actually middlemost button drag, and you can see that the values go right up to 10. If you drag the other way, they'd only go to 0. Because we didn't set a minimum value. So we'll drag it to the right, or just type 10 in here. Just make sure that the heel raise is on 10. And then we're going to go back to the heel raise group, and we're going to rotate that as far as we want it to go. So I want to remember this number though too, because we're going to do the same thing with the other foot. So let's say that's probably enough. Let's just go right to 70. Let's bring up a notepad. And I'm just going to type myself a reminder that the heel rise, the rotate X equals 70. It's just a reminder for when I do the other foot. I'm just going to bring that over to my other screen. Alright, so now that we have that on 70, we have our foot control heel raise set to 10 here. And as soon as you change those two values, you can hit key again. And now when you go to heel raise and you middle mouse button virtual slide, we have that control all set up. So we're going to do the same thing for the toe flap. So under where your driver is here, select toe flap. It's very important that you change that. And now we have to change the driven, what's being driven. So let's go to our toe wiggle group. We could have named that consistently toe flap, but it doesn't really matter. So we'll select that, and we have to click on load driven. And that's also going to be the rotate X. So as soon as you select that, you can see that we can key it. So we'll key it, and it's going to be keyed at 0. We'll go back to our foot control, and let's set this to 10. Our toe flap, and then we actually have to flap the toe, so let's go to our toe wiggle, and we'll just rotate that all the way up. I'm just going to go ahead and let it rotate 90 degrees, so I'll hit -90 in here, and I'm just going to type a reminder here. It's going to be -90, and then it'll be 90 on the way down, so we'll just key that. Now if we select our foot control, we highlight the toe flap attribute. We can middle mouse button drag. You can see that 10 is all the way up, and if we drag all the way to the left, it just goes flat. So we haven't set the negative value for it right yet. So we'll type in -10 here, or just middle mouse button drag all the way till it goes to -10, and then we'll select our toe wiggle group that we created before, and we'll just rotate it down. And I'm just going to type 90 in here. -90 was up, so we'll just type in 90, and I know that's going to be straight down. And as soon as we do that, we can hit key. Now if we select our foot control again and we activate the toe flap attribute and middle mouse button drag, we have that attribute all set up. Alright, so we'll put that back to 0. Alright, so for the foot roll, I'm going to select the toe pivot. We have this movement, and that's great, but we want to do the same thing with the back. Now we can get that if we just select the foot control and rotate it, but I don't want to have any set driven keys on my foot control. Just go to the top of the hierarchy here, which happens to be my toe pivot, and I'm going to Control G to group it again. I'm going to name it left heel pivot, and we're going to do the same thing as we did before. We're going to hit D on the keyboard so that we can change the pivot point. And I'm going to snap that by holding V and snap it right to the heel. Okay, and we'll hit D on the keyboard to lock that into place. And just make sure that's working well. We'll select our heel pivot. We'll load driven, and we'll select the rotate X, and we'll key it. So it's keyed at 0. Okay, so now we're going to set up our foot roll. It's a little more tricky. We're just going to keep our foot control as the driver with the foot roll selected. So the first thing we want to do is make sure our foot roll is on 0. We're going to key the foot in this position first. So we're going to be using our heel pivot, our toe pivot, and the heel rise. We'll go to our heel pivot first and just hit load driven. It's always going to be the rotate X, and we're going to key it. We'll go to the toe pivot as well. We'll load driven, go to the rotate X and key that. And then let's go to the heel rise group, load driven, select the rotate X and key that as well. Now we just want to have the foot roll back now, so that'll be -10. So now that that's set to -10, we can go to our heel pivot. And let's rotate it all the way back to about, let's say, -45. Alright, and we'll just key that. Just to be sure and stay organized, I'm just going to key everything. So I have the heel rise group loaded in right now. You can see it here. Load driven. Select the rotate X and we'll key it. And we're just going to do the same thing for all the other two that we were working with. So the toe pivot, I'm going to key that in. Rotate X and key it. Heel pivot, load it in. Rotate X and key it. Okay, so now if we go to our foot roll attribute, it should just roll straight down to being flat. Okay, so this will be -10. Okay, so let's set this to 5. We're going to roll the foot halfway forward. So we'll go to our heel rise group, and let's actually rotate that in X to about 30. Alright, so we're going to have to key all of them again. We'll just go top to bottom. The heel pivot, load the driver, select X and key. Some of these aren't necessary, but I'm just being thorough. Heel rise group, load driven, rotate X and key. Okay, so now we should have it rolling all the way back and halfway forward. Okay, now we're going to finish the roll. We're going to set the foot roll to 10. And we're going to take the heel rise off all the way. So we'll set that to 0. And then we'll go to the toe pivot. And let's rotate that in X. Let's just go to 45 like we have been. And now we'll do the same thing top to bottom. Load these in. Select the rotate X and key them all. We did 4 positions. We did completely flat foot, rolled all the way back, and then rolled halfway forward, and then all the way forward. So now if we drag over our foot roll attribute, we have a full foot roll action, which will come in handy for walk cycles. Now we're going to do the same thing with the other foot. I'm just going to repeat the same process. Last thing we need to do is add a pull vector constraint to control the knee direction. When we rotate the foot, the knee does change direction, but sometimes you might want to have the foot rotated this way and the knee bent in the other way. And we're going to create another control curve just like we did for the feet. Instead of creating a control curve that starts with a circle, because this next control is for the knee, I'm going to actually create a K, the letter K. So we can go to create, let's go to text, and we'll go to the option box. I'm just going to hold shift down, type K for a capital K. And you can choose whichever font you want. I'll just leave it on the default New Times Roman. And let's go to create. And then you can see it makes a little K for us, and we can scale that up. Alright, so I'm going to snap that to the knee joint, go to show and hide my polygons for a minute. And hold V down so I can snap the point. I just noticed that my pivot point for this K isn't in the center. So let's go to modify and we'll go center pivot. And now we can hold V down and snap it to the knee. And then we'll just bring it straight out, just so we know that it's parallel and it's right directly in front of the knee. Let's turn our polygons back on for a moment. Now, you don't want to have it too close. I wouldn't bring it in this close because if the knee goes past it, it'll pop backwards. So we want to have it a fair distance out away from the leg. You don't want it way out here either. So just somewhere like that is fine. A good way to check is to bring the knee up and bend it about halfway up. The K should be in front of the knee still. Let's go to edit, delete by type, and we'll choose history. It doesn't have any history, but it's just good to do that anyways. We'll go to modify and let's select freeze transformations just so that we can zero it back out at any time we want. And all we have to do to connect this is make sure you have your knee control selected, shift select the AIK handle, and we're going to go to constrain and we'll choose pull vector. And now it's kind of hard to see when the leg is straight, but let's give it a little bend. And now we can control the direction of the knee with this knee control. And let's make sure we name it too. Left knee control. And we're going to do the same thing for the other side as well. Alright, so that's it for setting up the legs. You can see now that we have a variety of range of motion that we can get with the feet. Now that the feet are rigged, if we select the root control, the feet are now planted to the ground. And we can move them around from the hips up.